So, Sarah, hi, welcome today. Thank you so much for coming along. Can you tell people about you? What is it? Well, firstly, how exciting, where do you live? Because that's slightly different. And what is it that you do for a living? And how did you get to that point of where you are today?
Okay, so thank you so much, Amanda, for asking me to come and talk to you today, because it's just wonderful to be in your presence. So
Mm.
yes, I don't live in the UK, even if I am British. I live in the south of France, not too far from Spain. And the way I ended up here was following a childhood dream, because when I was 10, I was studying French at school, which was part of a pilot project. Not many people spoke French back in the 70s in the UK. And our French teacher took us to Paris for a weekend. And as soon as I stepped off that ferry, I was like, oh my goodness, this feels like home, which was weird at the time. And so I remember going back after the weekend, telling my mum and dad that I was going to live in France when I was grown up. And they were just like, yeah, okay. And in a sense, it maybe didn't. No, I was going to say it maybe didn't happen. Of course it happened, but it might not have happened. That's what I mean. Because I was pushed or sort of nudged into a more scientific study.
Okay.
For my A levels, I did maths, physics, and French.
Wow.
Yeah. And looking back, I think it was because I was interested in the quantum physics side of things that they slightly touched on all the energy. And we'll talk about that a bit later. And as hard as I tried, I wasn't getting the grades. And I really remember that my teacher said, are you sure that you want to go and study physics at university? And I'm like, yeah, of course I do. And they were like, well, look at your grades in French. And I said, yeah. And I was getting excellent grades in French and not doing much work. And look at your grades in maths and physics. And I was like really working hard and not getting them at all. Mm. And so they said, well, why don't you just maybe change direction and go and study French? And at the time I was absolutely gutted, because I was like, no. No. And then there was like this sort of light bulb or whatever. And it was like, well, actually, remember what you said when you were like 10, that you wanted to go and live in France? And I was like, well, it is easy for me. French has always been easy for me. So I was like, yeah, I can do that. Sort of, least effort type thing. So that is how I ended up in France. But I haven't always been in the south of France. I was originally in Normandy for 16 years, which is where I met my husband. We've now got 3 children, and we moved down here about 16 years ago. So that's the first question about how I ended up where I am. And I love it, even though I'm very, very proud still to be a British citizen as well. But I just love living in France. It's a totally different way of life, doing things. And I feel it really enables me to express myself maybe differently. So that's good. And your second question, if I remember, was, what do I do and how did I end up here? So I am a coach, a teacher, a healer, an author, a mentor, a best friend, lots and lots of different things. And how I ended up here, to put it in a nutshell, was actually because that was what I needed at different points in my life that I didn't have. And I think a lot of us have come to sort of like our calling like that anyway. But it just sort of, everything has fitted into place over the past year, especially. But I've been on this particular journey for 14 years. I've had my own business for 14 years, and that has evolved along the way. And one of the reasons why I actually set up my own business in the first place was because I had a massive wake-up call with my body just actually causing me to stop.
Right.
So I was pushing through, ignoring all of the signals of my body that, you really need to slow down, you really need to delegate, you really need to let go of all this control, all the rest of it. And I was just like ignoring it, taking medication to get through the physical pain, maybe taking a day or 2 off work, and then just pushing through. And obviously, that wasn't the way to do things. And so the only way I realize now for me to actually stop was to make me physically stop, because as long as I could carry on getting up, dragging myself to work, doing all of the things in the house, helping the kids with the homework, all the rest of it, as long as I could physically carry on doing that, I would do it. So what happened was my beautiful body created a massive slip disc at the bottom of my spine. So I couldn't walk.
Wow.
So apart from the excruciating pain that you can imagine, I physically could not move. So I had to stay in bed. And that was tough. That was so, so tough. And I'm very lucky to have a brilliant GP who is also into sort of all the alternative holistic remedies and solutions as well. And he said something to me, it made me laugh at the time as well, but he said, right, you can't move, so that's good, because I've been getting you to slow down or wanting you to slow down for a long time. He said, do you like reading? I said, I love reading. He said, okay, go and get this book, or rather ask your husband to go and get the book because you can't move. Read it. Once you've finished, phone my secretary, book an appointment, and I will come to you and we will talk.
Okay. Now I want to know the book.
Exactly. So I'm not sure there's an English version yet.
Okay.
But it's basically about the mind-body connection. So there's an English equivalent, but of this particular book, I'm not sure there is.
Right.
And it's a brilliant book because it goes through all the meridian points, the chakras, and then goes to each part of your body and says, okay, well, if you're in pain, for example, if your ankle's hurting, this is what it could well be. You know, so it's actually giving you the indications of what it really is, because our body, as you know, manifests what we are unable to express or deal with.
So similar to Louise Hay in a way, with her How to Heal Your Life.
Exactly. There are lots of different books out there, but this specific book that he recommended was by a French Canadian who is an osteopath. So it's from his studies and his experience of, you know, helping people get through their pain. But yeah, Louise Hay, you know, it's that, but it's in more detail. So I read the book, was in tears because I finally started to understand everything. So he came around, we had a chat, and basically that really put me onto my personal healing path, reconnected me to my love for energy, because that's when I read about the meridian points and the chakras, and I now bring that into my business. I don't just do that, and I was also able to heal thanks to an energy healer who was also a therapist. So I had the best of both worlds, and a brilliant osteopath. So I didn't have surgery, but what that really enabled me to do was say, right, enough is enough, you know. You need to listen to your body, but you also need to reconnect and listen to your soul. And that's now what I help people do. So that's when I set up my first business. I could no longer work for anybody else. I had to do things on my own terms. So now I present myself, if you like, as the soul-based healer and mentor. And the soul is obviously for your soul, but the initials all mean different things.
Okay.
The S is for self. The O is for others. The U is for universe. And the L is for life. So I help people, I help women in particular, sensitive women, empathic women who've lost their way, who really have lost their identity, lost all sense of who they are for whatever reason. And I help them to reconnect to their soul, but to those four elements, to themselves first. Because for me, if we're not connected to ourselves, it's very difficult to be wholly and completely connected to others, the universe and life. There will always be something that's not quite right. So we begin our journeys together by going back to themselves. And that was my journey too, because I had put everybody else and everything else before me and lost myself in the process. So.
Beautiful. You know what I love most is actually when you just started to talk and you really owned that journey for yourself. A lot of people all of us, we take time to come to an understanding of really learning our own stuff. And I think it's quite hard. It's quite challenging at times to actually own that. So, that is, it's really powerful. And when you own that I felt really connected to that. It was really I felt that was really beautiful. It actually sort of made me feel quite emotional in that owning of that. So I just wanted to share that with you. And so nowadays, do you work one-to-one with people, or do you do more workshop type works? How do you work with people?
I do both because I love both. And for many, many years, I felt that we had to just choose one particular niche and one particular way of doing things.
Yeah.
And that didn't fit right with me either, because having done all of the work, and there's still work to do, obviously, but having been on this journey for so long already, I really go with the flow. And so there are times where I want to do and feel the need to do more group workshops, one-day retreats. I am working up to a week-long retreat as well. That's part of the plan. And then there are other times where I feel the need to do more one-to-one. And interestingly enough, anyway, that's what is presented to me. So I used to have a more specific plan of, right, well, you would do this type of workshop in this particular month or whatever, and then you will have so many one-to-one clients. I've really let go of that way of doing things and thinking and being right now. And I'm really just leaning into what presents itself to me, which is a mirror anyway of what I want to be doing and who I want to be being at that time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And so are your current clients only French, or do you have people from the UK at the moment as well?
I have both as well. Now, this might sound really silly, but being in France, when I first set up my business as a coach, so I've been in business, as I said, for 14 years, and the coaching element came in 7 years ago, once I trained to be a coach. And I focused purely on French people. Even though I had a website and even though I was online and all the rest of it, never once did it occur to me that, hey, I can actually also do this in English. So for at least 3-4 years, at least, I didn't have any English speaking clients whatsoever. And I didn't even go looking for them.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and I can't remember what happened. It must have been just like in a conversation like we're having right now, something like that. And the question was put to me, it was like, so about your clients. And I was like, oh my goodness, but why? Why am I limiting myself in a way? So actually now I have a mix of both, and they're not necessarily all in the UK. In the past, I've had English speakers in Singapore, in Australia, in Germany.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I work in both languages. For both and groups, yeah.
Do you find that your client base is women of a certain age, so they're probably more likely to have had children, had that phase, sort of, they've come to a certain age, and that's at the point at which the women realize, hang on, it's about time for me now, and there's what is me and who am I? And is that sort of the tends to be the client that you work with?
Yeah. At the beginning, it wasn't, because I think, like lots of us, when we set up our businesses, we more or less take on any client that comes to us. And that's fine. And obviously it serves its purpose, doesn't it? But the more I've journeyed and the more I've become clear on who I am and who I want to serve as well, who I want to really accompany on their journey, because it is a journey and sometimes it can be a very long journey. So there needs to be this connection. And so, I couldn't really say necessarily an age, because age isn't important to me. But as you've said, it's the part of their particular life path that they're on that is important to me.
I just wonder if maybe, in my experience of having worked in various workshops, I've noticed that interestingly, over the last, I don't know, maybe beyond 5 years, maybe 10 years, that much more men have been showing up in and wanting to work on themselves and change, and also a lot of really young, what I consider really young, sort of early 20s women are really sort of coming into an awareness of themselves and wanting to understand themselves better. And I think, God, that's just amazing, because me personally, I didn't, come into this until I was late 30s, early 40s sort of thing. So I'm always quite amazed when there are people who are really young, really keen to sort of open up and understand this their spirituality. And so I wonder if you've noticed that there's been a bit of a shift of ages in over time.
Definitely. I never really put myself out there, excuse me, as somebody who would only work with this type of person and that type of age.
Yeah.
And part of my current business is still as a teacher. So I'm transforming the way that I teach, but I've always been a teacher. I mean, one of my first jobs here in France was an English teacher for French students.
Okay.
And I love that, the actual teaching part as well. And it's very interesting that you mentioned young people and men, because two of my favorite clients, I suppose, that I had a couple of years ago before the lockdowns were two of my young male students. And they were, I think one was 20, one was 22.
Right.
And I was just amazed that they were very receptive to who I was as a person, because at the time I didn't want to talk about my coaching when I was teaching. I do now. I freely talk about both, but for me, they were two different things at that particular point in time.
Yeah.
So I would maybe occasionally just slip in something about coaching, but not advertise my business at all. Anyway, so I had these two in the same year. I worked with these two young men, one just for 3 months, and probably only 2 months would have been enough, to be honest, because he was right into it, right straight away. And the second one, it was much longer, because he had a lot more trauma that he needed and wanted to heal, even at his young age. So that was about 9 months. But it was just beautiful to be part of, because like you've said, they are so aware. They are so aware already of what they've been through, how it's manifesting in their life, and how it's stopping them from being who they want to be. And me, like you, when I had my physical wake-up call all those years ago, I was 39, right? So, I really do feel that our generation is waking up, or has been for quite a while now, but really waking up to all of this. And the younger generation, so my children's age, they're already aware of the whole thing.
It's become much more normalized, hasn't it? And for us, it was kind of, we felt like we were it was a bit new and exciting, even though it wasn't even new and exciting then, because, it's been going on for quite some time now. It wasn't so mainstream as it is today, was it?
Exactly. And I think part of what is helping the younger generation is people like us openly talking about it. I mean, my children know what I do, not necessarily in detail, because they're not that interested, to be honest, and that's fine. But they're used to me doing all of this. And because I have an office space where I receive and welcome my clients on a one-to-one here, they know. So I'll say, for example, because some of my clients come in the evening because they've been working during the day, so they can't come during the day. So if they're at home and I say, I need time and space right now because I have a client coming for energy healing or for one-to-one coaching or something. So it's become the norm in their lives.
Yeah.
And so even if they don't necessarily show much interest in it, they know it's out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same for a lot of young people. Plus, there's so much more out there, as you said, in the mainstream anyway. And because they're interested in YouTube, TikTok, you know, all the things like that, if they see people like us on there, then that's automatically going to raise some curiosity as well. So
absolutely, absolutely agree. Brilliant. And is there anything else I want to, well, before I ask if there's anything else, whenever I talk to anybody on this session, I always ask them how they are, not how, because the standard response is, yes, I'm great, thanks, thank you, but how are you? And I mean that from not a story, not a place of judgment. There's no questioning, you know, if I was to go into myself and there was something here like actually for me just now, I just had clarity come up, but you know, it could be something that potentially was a negative emotion that we like to perceive as negative. Everything is welcome. And I just ask you in this moment, how are you?
Okay, how am I right now in this moment? Very happy to have spent time talking to you, but very tired, because I have been working so hard with my lovely web designer to get this website up and running. And it's like a labor of love. So it's a happy tired, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming along when you're feeling tired, but I know it's also good for you because it's great to be able to talk about your new website's coming along soon. So I know once that's up and running, you can share that with everybody. So is there anything else that you would like to share today, like to talk about?
Just very, very quickly about the journey that I take people on. It obviously will be all up on the website too, but I just want to insist on the fact that the majority of people who come to me, whether it's for group, but mainly one-to-one, always say that they have never dared share that particular part of their story with anybody else before. And I feel very, very privileged to be able to accompany them on this journey of rediscovery, of reconnection to themselves, of acceptance of what they've been through, and then holding their hand for them to be able to gain the clarity that they need to move forward, to make the changes. And sometimes the changes are slight, just a little tweak, and sometimes they're massive transformational changes. But whatever they are, they're ready to do them. And I really, really live and breathe that now. That really is my sole purpose, because it's just magical to be able to help these people who are in the dark, who really have maybe tried, you know, other therapies, tried to talk to other people, tried other things or not. But it's just so beautiful to see people feel better about themselves, because as you well know, that then creates such a wonderful ripple effect. And I do believe that we can create a new world where love and community reign. And that really is my leitmotif for what I do. Anything I do is with that in mind, love and community. So that's what I wanted to end up with.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, that felt lovely, very heart-centered and beautiful, and very connected as well. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming along today. And
thank you so much, Amanda. Thanks.
You're welcome.